architecture and traditional construction practices in Indian cities. I sincerely hope that everyone has benefited from our so far held sessions, and every single session was intriguing and eye-opening. To begin with, I would like to mention that this is the second last day of the FDP, and we will have 2 sessions today. For session 1 of the day 4, we have with us Professor Binu Mol Tom, who will be presenting on the topic Vernacular Coastal Architecture and its Building Physics. So before we begin today's session 1, I would like to introduce you to Professor Binu Mol Tom. Dr. Binu Mol Tom is a conservation architect and an enthusiastic heritage activist. Having graduated from the College of Engineering, Trivandrum in 1994, she pursued her master's in architectural conservation from SPA Delhi. She further went on to take a doctorate in architecture from Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University, Hyderabad. She has also authored books and has written chapters in national and international books. Dr. Tom has many peer-reviewed papers and articles in academic journals, professional journals, refereed journals, refereed conference proceedings, and has many presentations to her credit, and has deliberated in various international and national platforms in the capacity of an academician as well as heritage activist. She has won awards into writing, traveling, painting, reading, and heritage mapping. She is currently acting as the HOD of the Department of Architecture, Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology, Kottayam. So now I request Professor Binu Mol Tom to join us for the session and share her knowledge with the participants. Yeah, ma'am. Slide share.
Hope it's in slide share mode now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. One of the main coordinator, Professor Anand Khatri, my own classmate at SPA Delhi. I don't know when he chose this topic, and he in fact put it on my head saying that you have to talk about vernacular coastal architecture, maybe keeping in mind that I belong to Kerala, where we have almost one part of the whole state is being shared by the sea. And so I thought it's an opportunity for me to discuss about vernacular coastal architecture, which is a subject that is not much dealt with. Maybe because of its semi-permanent character, or maybe because of the lack of what we call as the pomp and glory of otherwise understood as vernacular heritage, maybe lacking in the coastal architecture, because you have sea on one side. The sea is the life giver, and at the same time, the same life giver can be the life threatener and life taker too. So all through the presentation, you will understand that how semi-permanent or temporary these construction systems were, but what is the underlying knowledge that we can take it from the indigenous knowledge systems and also take it to the realm of scientific understanding. So I thought I should start with the science behind how these coastal plains are formed. If you look at the picture, you will understand that if you the half portion of our own country is covered or is protected by a coast. And in fact, India shares the longest coastline with the Indian Ocean. And we have coastal line along the east as well as the west, which in fact would have attracted a lot of invasions because sea was the easiest mode of transport during the time of the Arabs, the Chinese, maybe the French, the Dutch, the British, so on and so forth. And the rivers that originate from the mountains, when they flow down and they rush to the sea, as well as the sea with the sea waves, both are responsible for creating what we call as the coastal plain. If you look into the western side, that is basically the space that has been, the side that has been covered by the Arabian Sea, we have one whole stretch which starts from Gujarat to Kerala, which is shared by the Arabian Sea. And when it comes down to Kerala, we call it as a Lakshadweep Sea because of its proximity to Lakshadweep. While on the other side, we have the Bay of Bengal, which is the western coast, which takes up the states like Tamil Nadu, and the states above that. So as the picture very clearly denotes that we have sea on two sides, which gives us a lot of rich coastal heritage. And how this sea or the peninsular rivers which runs down creates coastal plain is the sea. When you have a rough weather, that is during the winter times, because of the waves motion, there could be sand stored which on the offshore, they could be pushed towards the beach side or towards the higher cliffs during the summertime, that is the summer beach. So this keeps on changing. That's why we say that you have to, maybe the reasons why we have the CRZ and all that comes up because of the movement in which the way in which the waves can create sand dunes as well as take sand dunes and create a plain which is not so permanent. So the sea waves cause erosion and deposition, and the rivers bring sediments from the hilltops. So both way, soil gets deposited, very fertile soil gets deposited, and then they lead to the formation of coastal plains. So this is what we have with us. We have the Kathiawar Plains, which shares the boundary of Gujarat with the sea. We have the Konkan Plains, for that of Maharashtra, especially the Goan region. We have the Kannad Plains, the small strip of land which is being shared by Karnataka with the sea, and then the Malabar Plains, which is about 595 kilometer long stretch, the state which has got purely one side, the sea, and the other side the hills, Kerala. And on the western side, sorry, on the eastern side, we have the Coromandel Coast that is covering up the one stretch of Tamil Nadu as well as half the stretch of Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh is a state which actually has a sea on two sides, sea on two stretches, the Coromandel Coast as well as a northern circuit. And then we have Odisha and the portion above, which is sharing the Utkal Plains. So this is how the whole maritime heritage or the coastal line of India exists. And before understanding the vernacular architecture that came up or the kind of people, their occupation, we should understand the physical characteristics of such coastal plains. That is why I have put up this picture, which gives you an idea about the kind of soil on which we had to build the constructions. So we have the coastal alluvial soil along the sides of the Coromandel Coast, and then we have the deltaic alluvial soil again along the northern circle as well as in the Utkal Plains. While when you come to the Malabar coast, we have the peaty and marshy soil, again the edge protected by mangroves. And then we have again coastal alluvial plains along the Konkan and Kannad regions. So, and also the Kathiawar Plains to some extent. So what we should understand is that the property of the soil, the load-bearing capacity of the soil has been one main factor that would have determined the kind of development of housing or development of, the construction along this region. And the physical characteristics obviously would cover the climate of the region. If you look into the stretch, we have moderate climate because of the presence of the sea. You have a beautiful breeze which flows into inland and towards the sea. So throughout the year, the sea surface absorbs heat slowly and also loses the heat very slowly. So that influences the adjacent land temperature. So the specific, because of the specific heat of water, which is more than that of the atmosphere. Altogether, we have a mild climate with hot summers and cool winters, and also very few hard freezes. That is very few. Precipitation is high. One reason why sweating should be, more. Humidity is high, especially in the region that is coming towards Kerala. And then monsoon, obviously there are heavy monsoons. For we can look for a southwest monsoon as well as a northeast monsoon because of the placement of the mountain, the Western Ghats, very particular to Kerala. But otherwise, we have this southwest monsoons as well as the northeast monsoons, which flows from the other side. In general, if you look at any coastal village, whether it is in Malabar Plains or it is in the Konkan Plains, you find that it is a sporadic development that has happened, mostly arranged in a linear order along the sea plain. So the buildings are not clustered as such into a housing form, but they are linear. But again, the linearity of the placement of the buildings or placement of the houses has been done in such a way that there are spaces that are created in between to accommodate to all sorts of occupation related activities, as well as the functional need of a community living and also the normal lifestyle. So maybe in one of the later slides, I will talk about the day cycle of the people, wherein we'll be able to understand why such kind of planning developed and how these fisher folk live based on that system, which is again a product of how they were made and what their kind of occupation was. So when you compare it with the hilly terrain, where they have a different kind of spatial planning, here it is mostly linear in arrangement. They have spacious common places because the spaces that were in between the buildings were scattered, and that common places would have been developed as a common activity space, which we will understand while we talk about the occupation. And most of these buildings will have a larger front space, and that front space would be used for drying the fishing net or parking the boat, which were all connected to their occupation. And you can see in this picture that what you see on the extreme right is a boat that is being covered by a thatched roof. And then onto the left, you see a building, a household building, which is again covered by a thatched roof. So the why I have put this picture is to show that even if it is a house or a boat, which is the most important tool for them for their living, is being covered by what was locally available, the leaves from the coconut tree, which are braided like how you braid the hair, and then dried roofing material. So the boats are to be protected because during the heavy months they do not go in deep for fishing because it's very unsafe. So what they do is they protect how they protect the house, the same manner they protect the most important tool or equipment for them, which is the fishing boat with which they make their livelihood. So as I said before, the fishermen hamlets are designed in such a way that they are arranged in rows in linear pattern along the coastal line. And it has been found that most of the time the door does not open directly facing the sea. The possibility could be the seaside, you have a lot of heavy breeze that comes in. And if you look into the inner nomenclature of these huts, there are just spaces that have been identified for sleeping and for cooking and all that. So maybe the wind that blows in should not directly get into the kitchen, because anyway the whole structure is made with semi-permanent material. The thatch or the timber that they have used will not last for centuries. It had to be redone in 5 years, 10 years. Thatch to the extent had to be redone every year. So that could be the reason that the wind should not blow into the kitchen which would be in use, and then make the fire spread. So mostly the doors are not directly opening to the seaside, while you have the front space which has been open to the beach side only, but not the door per se. Then the houses stand in dense rows facing seashore, though not the front door. Then why they require common space was basically like these people, since they are living by making their living out of the sea, the character of the sea is quite unpredictable, and every time you move into the sea, you move with the fear that only if God blesses, you will be able to come back to your family. So that kind of fear was always there, and it is always there with this fisher folk. For that reason, when men go to the sea, women tend to spend more time in their religious prayers, no matter they are Christians, Hindus, or Muslims. A community space was required, whether it is named as a church or named as a temple or as a mosque, is required for each community, because of this fear of their men going to the sea. Women do not go to the sea for fishing in the boat. Men, because this fishing happens late night and early in the morning, or in the early morning hours, because the first catch has to come by 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 in the morning, at the least by 5 in the morning, because it had to be auctioned, and the auctioned product had to be taken to the markets, and then it is fresh selling of selling of fishes. Women would be spending their time in the houses when the men would go to the sea for fishing or in their boats. So what I mean to say is that a common place, a landmark building is very much necessary for them, for their religious purpose. And along with that, they require spaces for cleaning, keep their fishing nets and other paraphernalia neat. So the houses will have a front yard. It could be a connected front yard of all the houses, where they would dry the nets, and then they hang the nets along with their house form, so that the nets can be put to use the next day. So if there is a boat that belongs to a particular household, then the boat will also be parked in front, but closer to the sea than closer to the house, while the net drying areas, and then it is not just a one-man work. You have 2 or 3 families together, or more than that number of families, the heads of the families getting together and going in a fishing boat. So it is again a group work, where all these people who are involved in fishing in a particular boat come back with this huge net, and then that net gets dried in front of one of the houses or 2 or more houses. So that kind of open space are required. Then obviously, being a habitation, they will have their own festivals and the cultural activities, celebrations, then marriages, which would be conducted in one of these religious buildings. Then maybe a space would be temporarily constructed for the rest of the activities connected with the marriage or childbirth or whatever. So this kind of spaces are also found to be interwoven within this hamlets or huts of these fishermen. This is just a small schematic section of the fishermen hamlets in Trivandrum. In the Shangamugam beach, you see the sea line, the sea water. Then you see the beach line where boats are parked. And then obviously, because of the elevated land, slowly there is some space which could be demarcated as a space for public utility, to the extent it could be just a communication line or a transportation line, a road, a pathway. Then it could be a place where these nets can be dried. And then you have these hamlets. The hamlets, which are linear in arrangement, but again will have spaces in between, depending upon how the land has been allocated to each one of them. And the beauty of these houses or these homesteads are that these houses are all constructed using materials that is available. So maybe a coastal plain will not have much of laterite available for construction. It could be mud. It could be, because if you look very particularly at the region of Kerala, we have lowland, midland, and highland. Lowland is where you have the coastal plain. Midland is where the space you have laterite deposits, but it is between the hills and the coastal plain. And then you have the hills where you have a lot of trees which could be cut down and which could be used for construction. So the kind of architecture, vernacular architecture that came up along the coastal line are basically borrowed from, or you'd say that the vernacular style developed out of whatever material was available in hand for construction. While you make a comparison with that of the hinterlands or the midlands, there were specific rules or canons which had to be followed in constructing a house. For example, if you look into a typical taravada, that is a typical courtyard house, there are hard and fast rules which tells you what should be the perimeter of the construction, and that perimeter of the courtyard house itself decides, that becomes a genetic code to extrapolate the number of even the rafters that are required to cover the roof. So what I mean to say is that there is a genetic formula that is being fixed directly based on the perimeter of the house that has been designed or that has been constructed in the traditional manner, that is in the olden days. While here it is basic, and even if you look at the traditional architecture of any region for that matter, there will be hard and fast rules, and then and that will not be diluted. But here there are no hard and fast rules as such, because you have the rule that is applicable is it has to be built for the need. What is needed has to be built. And for a place like Kerala, you have this Ekashala. Ekashala is a single unit which will have 3 rooms basically. The center room will be the Ara, which is an agrarian, because of the agrarian nature of the community. You have an Ara. Ara is a storehouse for all these grains. And then you have a space called Ranga, which would be an activity space, including a kitchen. And then you'll have a Vasa, which would be a resting place, which could be called as a bedroom. When it comes to, and this is the basic form of a traditional building, Ekashala. When you have 2 Ekashalas, it becomes Vishala. When you have 3 Ekashalas, it becomes Trishala. And when you have 4, it becomes Chadurshala, or basically the courtyard house. But what we find in these fishermen huts are just Ekashalas. Ekashala is just one single unit, but again it is not very specifically divided as you would find in the Ekashalas found in the midlands or highlands, as you have a central storeroom and then 2 rooms on the other side. Rather, it would be just a space that would be demarcated and would have a enclosure all around to protect and give privacy for the people who are living there, and then also to meet certain functional requirements. Maybe the rooms will have a partition, but again that is semi-permanent partition, which can be removed and which again would be made out of these kind of semi-permanent building materials. So the homesteads that we find for the fisher folk is simple individual spaces which are detached huts. They are not joined together in the vernacular times. I mean, I'm talking about the vernacular, because recently you find that most of these vernacular houses, because of its nature of being very temporary, they get destroyed by the fury of the sea. And also at the same time, there would be government schemes with which these buildings would be rebuilt. So we have to compare the modern kind of resettlement as well as the vernacular settlements that developed in the most organic manner. So that if you look at the interiors, the interior arrangement is very pragmatic and practical in form, where you have a single hall, and then you'll have spaces that has been defined for activities like cooking. And then sometimes you find that the rice is boiled outside, because it takes, I mean, a large quantity of rice has to be cooked, and then it might be easier to get all the logs and keep it outside, like how the tribal people do. So that kind of arrangement. Or you will have a kitchen inside where you sit in the floor level and do the cooking. Then obviously the bed space, if it is for a couple, then it will be separate, and they have the family and other family members within the house. Then they have spaces which is divided by a semi-permanent divider, mostly a wall which is made out of this thatch and wood construction. Then in the case of Kerala, we have these backwaters. So if the sea and the backwaters join at certain points, so the hamlets that have been made there also will utilize foliage materials like leaves, then whatever wood is available for construction, even the wood from the coconut tree would be used. Whatever is available at a very cost-effective manner will be used for construction. And in those places where there is laterite or rock or mud, then that would become the base. And then obviously if there is more laterite would be covered with lime plaster, lime taken from lime shells, seashells, and then that would be used for constructing the walls. And the roof would be made out of timber. But again, it is nowhere in comparison with the traditional timber carpentry which is found in the palaces or even in the ekashalas of traditional architecture. Then the roof would be covered with thatch, or sometimes if they are prosperous, they can even go for the roof tile, the Mangalore tiles. See, what you see here is the typical, recreated form of a fisherman's hut. You would see that these are the thatch leaves which have been plaited, like how you plait your hair, and then, it has been dried and then it is used. First, the coconut leaves are cut. It is left for semi-drying, and once it is semi-dried, then it would be plaited so that it becomes a kind of a sheet. And the advantage of this is that it is kind of semi-ventilated too. So the air the wind that falls onto the surface can also get into the interiors, keeping the temperature cool inside. And then the roof, again covered by thatch or whatever reeds that are available, piled one above the other, will make up the vernacular fisherman's house. And then the door, if bamboo is available, that lightweight bamboo would be used as a frame, and then the door would be fixed on it. If that is not available, normal wood, that whatever is available, even the trunk of a coconut tree would be cut, and then that would become a post and a lintel construction for the door, and then the door would be fixed onto that particular door frame. See the mask. There is something which is very interesting. Maybe I would like to share it in this particular platform. Many of you would have heard about Muziris. Muziris is the oldest, maybe the Roman times, town that was rediscovered and excavated near Kodungalur in Kerala. When that excavation happened, about 4 meters down, footings of buildings were found. And very interestingly, these foundations were found to be oriented in the southwest direction. Normally in Kerala, we have this southwest, east and that is south and north, east and west cardinal direction orientation very much required as per the Vastu principles. But here it has been found that the buildings, the foundation, the excavated foundation were found to be orienting towards the southwest direction. So that maybe it is to bring in wind, or it is just respecting the alignment of the sea. Whatever be it, the reason has to be discovered. Here also, in most of the fishermen colony, you would find that the mast itself is a bit tilted from a proper cardinal direction. So you know how tsunami occurs. It comes unannounced. And if you have flatter surfaces lying parallel to the seaside and the sea waves come and bash straight on the walls, there is a probability that the wall can topple faster. And if it is little off-centered, like if it is not in the cardinal direction, the off cardinal direction, then the water wave that comes touches the corner of the wall, will find its space along the sides, so that the building would be less harmed in comparison with when the building is facing straight onto the side of the sea from where the waves would rise up. So that could be one reason why it is little off cardinal. Then basically, this could be a consequence of whether, further division of the main living. That could also be a possibility to have kitchen in the leeward side. Again, the same old reason which I said, timber is one building, metal thatch is another building material that will be used. So kitchen will have, it's a fire point. So when you have a fire point and that fire point is placed in the windward side, and by mistake, if wind catches and the fire spreads, then the whole house will be under fire. So to reduce the threat of fire being spread, it is better to place a kitchen in the leeward side. So this could be the reasons why the buildings would have been off cardinal and maybe mostly towards the kitchen being placed towards the northeast direction, because that is the leeward side and southwest is a windward side during the predominant seasons. Now, if we look at the building physics, it's very simple. The land, the alluvial soil or the peaty soil has got less of strength, less of bearing capacity. So what we could go ahead is only lightweight construction. And why I would say lightweight construction is because heavy constructions will have a settlement issue. To the fact that there were a lot of rebuilding that had happened in Kerala after the floods, after the tsunami. And it has been found that certain donor organizations have come up with a pile foundation for a building which is about 48 square meters of area, has got some 10 to 20 piles. And then these piles were inserted to make the structure big and strong. Again, the issue is that whether to go for a building material like steel because of the salt breeze or the breeze that would carry the salt, and then lack of maintenance of a concrete structure, a concrete pile or a beam. There are chances that steel, when it is exposed, can get eroded if it is not of the best quality. So those kinds of danger has to be seen when we look at constructing in such coastal regions. So let us look at the wisdom of the old people, what we understand as a vernacular architecture. They've gone for very lightweight structure. Maybe it is a need that they could not find an alternative. Whatever was available there, including bamboo or including wood, or even the thatch, tile to some extent, mud if it is available, plastered with lime, again taken from the seashells. So whatever was naturally available, not processed, had been used so that they could have a lightweight construction. Second thing is that in case of danger, because these people always carry within them the danger of sea attacking them, though sea is mother to them, because see, it's the life provider. It provides food for the community, and it provides prosperity for the community. Still, there is always a danger that lies with the sea, that when sea is furious, it can just smash up everything. So maybe a lightweight construction would bring down the kind of danger otherwise would happen during such a calamity. So to reduce the casualties, a lightweight construction is always advisable. So the vernacular had this wisdom of having lightweight construction, probably because they didn't have an alternate building material, which could be a heavy construction. And they had to bend upon the available resources, which were all natural. Since they were natural, they were lightweight. And then because of this heavy rainfall along this region, they had to go for sloping roof. So you move from the Konkan to the Malabar to the Coromandel coast, you find that the vernacular buildings were all covered with a sloping roof to take care of. And because we should also understand that these vernacular structures were not constructed to resist the natural forces. Like how we would say that earthquake resistant buildings. I would say that anything that we do is only tolerant. Just 2 days back, there was an earthquake in Taiwan, and many of the buildings came down, and when it was just 7.1 Richter scale. So most of our buildings that we engineer today can take up the Richter scale, the shake up to 8 Richter scale. So we cannot have earthquake resistant building, but we can have earthquake tolerant building. Similarly, construction that we do here be resistant to the forces of nature, especially that of the sea, but they can all be tolerant. So maybe the heavy monsoon, how do you live with it? You have to live with it because you cannot stop it. So have sloping roofs in such a way that every drop that falls on the building will not settle down there and then leak into the building, having improper leakage into the structure. Rather, it would just fall on the roof and then fall away from the building. So if you look at the traditional architecture, if it is a timber roof, there would be even a small 12-degree deflection, which is called as a jwala in the local language. And that jwala will give a small upward thrust for the roof, so that the water that falls, even the drop of water that falls onto the edge, will be thrown away from the structure rather than into the structure. So the vernacular wisdom, as we see today, were all hinting into tolerating the forces of nature rather than resisting the forces of nature. And it was basically a kind of submission to the forces of nature and living with it, because they understood that these forces of nature are their life givers and their life supporters. So these are some pictures which will give you an idea about how vernacular buildings came up along the coastal plain using the materials that were available in these regions. Yeah, this is a beautiful picture which I proudly showcase, showing that just a coconut tree and the leaves that have been sourced from the coconut tree have been used as the roof as well as for the walls of the main house, which we call as a the mother house, as well as accessory subsidiary houses. You can look at it and see that, the beauty of this is that heat cannot retain within the house because these are all ventilated, and then it will not bring in heat. Like what happens with our modern construction is that we have concrete houses, you have walls which are considered as, isolating yourself from the external environment. And then we have glasses, which works beautifully for this greenhouse heating effect within the house. So the glasses, the heat that comes in, which increases from morning till evening, gets trapped within the house. While here, there is nothing that is trapping anything within. You have a privacy because of this wall. And since, if you remember, I said in the beginning that they had a community life. So it was basically respecting each other's privacy and not, intruding into another person's personal life. Yet you have your own requirement of privacy, using the materials that are available and the materials that are perishable, knowing that you have to redo it again and again. So they source these coconut leaves throughout the year. They are stored. They make, in fact, even the fishermen, the women of the house, when they have sourced these coconut leaves, they make them, plate them into these kinds of components and then even sell them. So this is the beauty of the vernacular architecture, which we think is just, makeshift arrangement as you would see it in a slum. But it is a kind of wisdom that they had to come up with because of the material that is available, the lack of money to that extent, for not, because they couldn't procure the materials from the hinterlands or from other states and bring it down to your particular place and then construct. At the same time, something that is very much comfortable for living in that hot, basically when you have the sea, and if you remember the first initial discussion, the heat is comparatively higher than the other regions. But again, the heat has been brought down because of the continuous breeze that comes from the sea and from the land. So this kind of, thatch being used as a building material, not only for the roof, but also for the walls, is also an interesting aspect that we need to look at in vernacular architecture. So why it is said that the building that is built is just to meet the needs is because we need to understand that the occupation of these people, whether they're men or women, it is all based on fish, which is freely available in the sea. So what happens is that the men go for fishing in boats, as you would see here, and then they do the fishing, and early morning hours, they come back with the fishes on their boats. Then the women of the house go to the beach, help the men unload the fishes from the boats. Then there would be a lot of retail sellers, wholesale sellers and all. So maybe half of the fish harvest would be sold at that spot where the sea meets the beach. Then what the women do is they carry these fishes in small baskets which are woven by them using strips of bamboo, and then carry them as head loads, and they move from one place to another, carrying these baskets full of fishes into other communities who are not fisher folk community, and sell the fishes, but again fish eaters to sell the fishes. So that happens during the morning hours, like 7 to 10 or so, or even to 11. After that, they come back, do the cooking. But before that, they have done the cooking at home, and food has been parcel for children who have to go to school and, all that. Then after selling, they come back, purchase vegetables, because they only have fishes with them. So purchase vegetables and rice, and come back and do the afternoon cooking. And this is the time when men would be clearing off the net and drying the net for the next day's catch. And then they would be resting because they wouldn't have had their sleep during the previous night. And if there are fishes that are not sold, then the women, along with the help of men, do drying of these fishes again next to the places where they would have dried the nets. And why they dry the fish and keep, or even for selling, is because you cannot do fishing during the 12 months of the year. So what they do is they keep a lot of fish in dried condition, which can be used during those times when they could not go to the sea for harvesting, for fishing. Because of the monsoons, there would be government ban for small-time fishermen, or even for big boats, to go into the deep sea for the safety of these people, of this community. Hence, the fishes will be dried and with salt, and then will be kept safe for those months when you don't have fresh fish to eat or even to sell. So if you look at this day cycle, then you realize that there are spaces that have been demarcated or that got developed based on the need of the people. Apart from the small housing unit that they have, the extent of outer spaces, outdoor spaces that are also, we wouldn't call it a design space, but those are all occupied spaces for the main occupation, which is fishing. So you would see a beautiful phenomena here, which is very much organic in nature. The house being constructed for the basic necessity out of the resources that are available, and then the rest of the open spaces are just carved out to meet the needs of the occupation or the accessory, the subsidiary needs of the main occupation. So it becomes a kind of evolved community or community space which would be used in common grounds. So the beauty of these communities, fishermen communities, that, as I said before, they are seafaring people. They call Mother Sea, like Kadalamma. That's Kadal is sea. Extremely religious because they know that they are actually keeping their life intention to go to the sea and come back. And how it is understood today is through an intangible heritage, which we call as the folklore, what we call as intangible. So there are songs that would depict or instruct the womanhood of the fisher folk that your man has gone to the sea, you have to take care of your chastity or your morality, and if you do not take care of your morality, then your husband may not come home. It says that Mother Sea, seeing that you are not moral, you're immoral, then the sea mother would take your husband. So when these kinds of folklores or folk songs are being sung, these people will become extremely cautious about what they should be doing and what they should not be doing. That is why if you move into these communities where fisher folk live, you realize that they're very innocent people. They don't have any kind of hatred or hard sorts of feeling that we have, because every day they are risking, their husbands are risking, or the men in the family are risking their lives to make a livelihood. And that is one reason why they would have been extremely religious too, because for the sake of their lives and the life of the men within the family. There are various caste groups, as I said before. You have the Muslims, you have the Christians, you have the Hindus, and the kind of homogeneous, marriage would not happen between the caste groups, but there is a lot of taking and giving between these caste groups, and there is not much of separation, though the rituals and practices are different. When they go together in one boat, they are just homogeneous composition. And maybe because even if you look at the whole coastal line along from Gujarat to Odisha, you'll see that these are all people with different ethnic background, but they share the same common cultural behavior because of the job risk that is involved within their life. The maritime environment and the job risk that is involved in it will make a fisherman community, the cultural pattern of the community, very unique, though they have different ethnic backgrounds. And maybe these two things, the maritime environment and the risk of the occupation that they are involved in, are the determinant influences on the socio-psychological impact that has become the characteristic nature of these fisher folk. If you look at them as a community, you will see that the community is very interactive. There is a lot of sharing and caring. If one family is in distress, you would find all the rest of the families coming together and taking care of that particular family, which you wouldn't find in other communities. Here it is just, and it's all because of the common threat that they have, or the common fear that they have. They support each other. Then there is high level of security within the community, and maybe that is the reason they didn't even have to look for an alternative building material than the most temporary building material attached, or whatever reed is available along the Konkan coast or the Kannad coast has been used by the fishermen, because of this kind of security feel that nobody would interfere beyond what is expected or beyond what is required. Then a lot of shared facilities, they do share facilities, that there is community participation, which are all their strengths. Then obviously they have a haphazard lifestyle. Maybe men get into drinking because of the hazardous occupation that they are involved in. So there is a kind of over usage of liquor, and then other drugs and all that. Then many a times you see that the communities keep on becoming more and more. The population increases, so the squatter settlement becomes extremely congested, and then it becomes unfit for living, is also part and parcel of this development that happens within vernacular communities. Degraded environment, because sea, every time sea is furious, it takes away part of the land, it takes away part of the construction, and then they wouldn't be in a position to rebuild themselves without the support of the government or other organizations. So you would find that there is a degraded environment, and mostly because there is no proper waste management, the environment gets degraded. And fish being, though it is very, I mean, the non-vegetarians would agree with me that it is a very tasty food, but once it is decayed, it could be one of the most nastiest thing to keep. So maybe the accumulation of waste, even these women cut the fish and distribute, or they sell. So there are a lot of waste that needs to be handled, which is not properly handled. Then it can create a degraded environment. And another problem with this community is that the more they are closer to each other, if something happens within their community, and if there is an outsider who has created that misrap within the community, then they are extremely, dangerous people. And they can go beyond their limits to give back to that particular group who have tried to attack them or destroy them. So there are lots of opportunities within this community, especially within this vernacular style of living, like the coastal front development. It can have small scale cottage industries, because women, once they come back after selling the fish, they have time for other small cottage industry development, which can also become part of this. Then there are a lot of beautiful spaces that is self-created, which can become very lively. And then the house opens into a street, almost like a space which we can call it a street. So that kind of eye on the street is always there. You wouldn't find any threat within this community, because there are people within the houses and have this eye on the street concept. If you look into the modern buildings, maybe we have CCTV camera and all trying to capture if there is something that goes wrong in the community, but that capturing happens only after the event has occurred. While here, because the house is an extension and the street becomes just an extension of the house, anything that happens on the street can be prevented, because there are people with eyes on the street. So there are many opportunities within this vernacular housing unit. And same as I said, weakness, some of them will fall out as a threats, like the rise of the sea level, which is again a common phenomenon all over the world, the sea level rise. And we should really look at it, especially with this sustainable development goals, how the coastal communities will be affected because of the sea level rise. Then the socio-economic crisis, then flooding, tsunamis, natural disasters, all these can be considered as a threats for this community life. And there are a lot of vernacular know-how which we need to rediscover from this group. I was fortunate to know more about this because one of my PhD students who is a faculty in College of Engineering Trivandrum. She is doing her PhD on disaster risk management in coastal areas, and I'm guiding her. So through her, we were looking at how, what all are the indigenous knowledge system or the vernacular knowledge systems that are embedded within this community, which actually protects themselves as well as their shore. So her name is Smita. She has come up with certain studies where she has pointed out that the site protection or the shore protection is mostly because of they have a variety of creepers in mangroves. Then local, every coastal line has got these mangroves as well as indigenous plants like Puchamulla, Kallimulla, Chakramulla, Kaida. These are all the indigenous plants in Kerala, but even in Pongan regions, they have other indigenous plants which form, which add to the development of the mangroves, and then that protects the shore rather than having the rubbles being placed as a sea wall and protect the sea. And then obviously for building protection, sandbanks are erected and then individual building units are built on that. And then the sandbanks, understanding the high tide and low tide level is something which is ingrained in this community. So knowing that, they would increase the height of the sandbank and then obviously divert the water course to protect their structures. So these are the vernacular knowledge that are embedded within the communities. Then we have, this is something which would be of interest for you, the Chinese fishing nets which just came to Kerala. I'm not detailing out much into it, but it is the name, as the name suggests, it has been brought from China. And it has been very much used during 1350 to 1450. And even today at Fort Cochin, you would find this. See, this is just a note about the resettlement housing. One of the very popular project which Padma Shri, late Shri Laurie Baker had taken up in Poontura, where we had this linear houses initially, which was a vernacular way of living, which he remodeled it as again a linear stretch, but with common spaces within the units, which was kind of successful. There were a lot of limitations for this project because of the area that government could provide as a constructed facility. But again, this is one of the, we would say that a good example for a rehabilitation project, learning from the vernacular, like how, what were the wisdom that were underlying within the vernacular buildings. Partly they have been brought it into this resettlement housing. We also have this kind of resettlement projects. This is from Tankubar, that is in Tamil Nadu, for the tsunami victims of 2004, where you have these kinds of units, modular units designed and constructed. But what I found most interesting is this must be before the inauguration, but after people have started living in this area, they have gone back to that vernacular roofing system, maybe because they wanted to reduce the heat that would penetrate from the concrete roof, or they wanted an additional space, or they were more comfortable with such kind of, using local materials, or they didn't have the money to have extra constructions, whatever be it. I was very happy to see that the vernacular has not died off, in spite of having the modern buildings designed and constructed in specific patterns, very much military in character. They have not forgotten the vernacular wisdom, and they have tried to bring in, overlay the vernacular wisdom onto these buildings. So now it is a question like, this, what you see onto the left side is a 19th century photograph of a typical fishing unit, fishing settlement. Onto the right, what you see is a 21st century settlement development for the fishermen colony. So the whole question is about necessity and sustainability, but again, whether the vernacular or the modern is up to us to decide, understanding the wisdom of the old. And the main reason behind this change, a sudden jump from vernacular to the modern layer, is because of the impact of globalization. And many people are leaving this job because it is not giving them much of a fortune. So they move out into other occupations. And then even the fishing outcome, I mean, the product that you get or the harvest that you get from the sea is as reduced because of mechanized fishing and all that. Then there are a lot of indigenous knowledge system that is associated with the community. It could be related beliefs, lifestyles. I would just explain a few, which again I have borrowed from my students with IMV, where the formation of this Chagara mud bank, or rather I would explain that how this fishing, they take up this fishing based upon the lunar path. So understanding, we all know that moon has got a profound influence on all human beings. So moon is a root cause for having high tides and low tides. So this kind of vernacular fishing activities were based on the positioning of the moon. So when moon moves to the east, possibility of fish stock also is there to move to the east, which is again found to be true as per experience. And there are scientific explanation which Plutarch has already given about the effect of gravitational pull of moon, how it affects, and then how the tidal forces move. And whenever there is a kind of ripple within the sea, the fishes would be the most sensitive organisms to understand that, and they move into other pastures. So depending upon the positioning of the moon, the movement of the moon, fisher folk knew, this is part of the indigenous knowledge system, that they knew when to fish, where to fish. And also deciding upon what should be the depth of the fishing within the ocean was also depending upon the positioning of the stars. Then fishing was also based on the movement of winds and clouds. Then fishing is also based on, finding out, identifying certain birds in some areas, and then looking for certain fishes. How the bird would dip inside, and the time taken for that bird to dip inside, come with a fish on its beak, would give an understanding of, for the fishermen, how deep they have to go and what kind of fish stock would be available within that area. And then deep sea fishing living near sea bottom are more sensitive to movement of active faults within the water body. So this kind of indigenous knowledge system has never been looked upon with vigor and scientific understanding, even in disaster reduction, even in disaster management. The presence of this indigenous knowledge has always been overlooked. So how these people used to connect each other, the social connectivity, how they used to share the profit, like taking care of differentially abled and taking care of the aged fishermen, has not been documented, nor have they been put to use into the modern life. But now, since they all have this nuclear families, the whole social system have changed. But initially, during the olden days, they had this kind of social connectivity and understanding to support each other. And then there is a indigenous knowledge system available for food security, like drying fish, as I said before, then leveling of ground and having certain paddy on a small scale approach, and then having vegetable gardens, then cattle rearing to some extent. All these are all parallelly worked out as part of the indigenous knowledge for the community to survive without scarcity. So to sum up, it is now left to us to understand and come to a conclusion, which is more important. Maybe if you look at the architectural outcome of the coastal fishermen community, you would see that these are just temporary structures, but the inbuilt knowledge system, whether it is in construction or it is in their mode of living or in their way of occupation, going ahead with the occupation, needs to be preserved. Especially the indigenous knowledge system has to be preserved, and not just preservation, because when you say it has to be conserved and preserved, it becomes a stagnant form of knowledge. But it should be brought into today's living system, where we go ahead with disaster risk reduction. So how this indigenous knowledge system can be brought into disaster risk reduction has to be taken into study for the whole, such a long coastal line we have for India. So that needs to be looked at. And then I'm sure many communities will have more and more system, maybe a comparative study among these systems of understanding the movement of the fish, looking at how the moon moves, the distance, the apogee and perigee of the moon. All these needs to be brought under the realm of scientific understanding. Now the question is, like, you have modern housing systems which government can provide for them, whether that is more sustainable or the vernacular system of constructing and reconstructing, because the process is more important than the product. And even now we all talk about, when we talk about conserving heritage, especially if we look at the Eastern heritage, the Nara Charter itself proved that we need not be Eurocentric. We can be regions centric within the smaller pockets of regions which have brought out these kind of marvelous architectural artifacts, architectural structures. So these kind of outcome which has been brought out by a vernacular community, which were more sustainable, needs to be understood, and that has to be brought into the modern planning. So the whole question is whether it has to be built for the needs or for standardization, which is easy for government agencies. And then what is the relevance of indigenous knowledge in coastal life is very important to be understood. So I think the time allotted to me was till 2:05. So I had to rush up in between certain slides. I'm sorry for that. And I thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you, Professor Binu.